Trapboy Freddy has been banned from Dallas after snitching on Yella Beezy. And now, for the first time, he's finally speaking on it. He has come out and addressed the situation directly, pushing back against the label that has been attached to his name and making his position clear about what he believes actually happened and why people have the story wrong. But here is the thing, his reaction raises more questions than it answers. Because once you understand the full timeline, once you see what was inside those court documents, once you understand exactly what role he is expected to play in one of the most serious criminal cases in Texas hip-hop history, his explanation starts to look a lot more complicated than he is letting on. He says he had no choice. He says people do not understand how the legal system works. He says being in that courtroom does not make him what everybody is calling him. Maybe he is right. Or maybe the facts of this case tell a different story entirely. We are going to lay all of it out. Stay locked in. Yo, what's good, fam? Today we are breaking down the full timeline of how Trapboy Freddy went from being one of Dallas's most respected rappers to being banned from his own city. What the court documents actually reveal about his role in the Yella Beezy capital murder case, and what his reaction really means when you stack it up against the facts. This one is layered, so make sure you stay with us all the way through. Let's get into it. To understand why this situation is hitting so differently, you have to understand who Trapboy Freddy is and what he actually meant to the Dallas rap scene before all of this went down. Born to various more, Trapboy Freddy came up out of Oak Cliff, the southwest Dallas neighborhood that has been producing artists and street legends for decades. He did not come from a cosign or a label handout. He built his name the old way, through mixtape grind culture, through underground singles, through features, through showing up over and over again until the city had no choice but to acknowledge him. His Trapboy Freddy Krueger mixtape series put him on people's radar early. And when his single Lil Quita hit 8 million streams and YouTube named him an artist on the rise, it became clear that he was not just a local name, he was becoming something bigger. The legendary Erykah Badu personally invited him to perform at her birthday party. He was making music that connected not just with Dallas listeners, but with audiences across the South, across Texas, and beyond. He was one of the most authentic voices coming out of the city, and his relationship with Oak Cliff was never performative. It was embedded in everything he made. And a huge part of that identity was built alongside Yella Beezy. Both men came from Oak Cliff. Both men came up through the same streets, the same musical environment, and the same grind. Yella Beezy, born Marquise Conway, had been climbing his own ladder through the early and mid part of the 2010s, releasing mixtapes and building regional momentum before his 2017 track That's On Me turned into a slow-burning national hit. His 2018 full-length project Ain't No Going Back entered the top half of the Billboard 200. His music surpassed 1 billion plays across streaming platforms. He became one of the biggest names to ever come out of Dallas, and Trapboy Freddy was right there beside him for a significant portion of that journey. The two were viewed as brothers, in the truest sense of that word, within the Dallas rap community. They were allies, collaborators, and representatives of the same city, speaking the same language. In May 2020, they made that bond official with a joint collaborative mixtape. They called it I'm My Brother's Keeper. The title alone told you everything about how they presented their relationship to the world. The project was released through Itchco and 300 Entertainment, and it was the first full-length collaborative effort between the two Oak Cliff natives, though they had already connected previously on the remix to Yella Beezy's That's On Me. When the project dropped, both men were vocal about what it represented. Trapboy Freddy said it was a moment for the city, a moment for Texas, and a moment to put on for the place that raised them. Yella Beezy described the concept of the title as riding for your brother, going to war for him, always being there no matter what. He said it meant being locked in forever. Those were not throwaway promotional quotes. That was the foundation of how the public understood their relationship. Two men from the same neighborhood calling themselves brothers, making music to prove it. Which is exactly why what happened next hit so many people like a gut punch. Yella Beezy now finds himself at the center of one of the most serious criminal cases in the history of Texas hip-hop. He is facing a charge of capital murder for remuneration, meaning prosecutors allege that he paid another person to carry out the murder of rival Dallas rapper Mo 3. Mo 3, whose real name was Melvin Noble, was shot and killed on Interstate 35E in Dallas on November 11, 2020. Investigators say Mo 3 was chased down on the freeway and struck in the back of the head after abandoning his vehicle during the attack. A bystander was also injured. Mo 3 later died at a local hospital. The killing shocked the city and the broader hip-hop community. Dallas had lost one of its most promising voices, and the circumstances of his death immediately raised questions that would take years to fully surface through the legal system. A Dallas County grand jury indicted Yella Beezy in March 2025. Prosecutors allege that he hired a man named Kewan Dontrell White to carry out the killing, and they point to financial evidence suggesting Conway withdrew $40,000 in cash within days of the murder. Kewan White has separately pleaded guilty to federal firearms charges and faces additional charges connected to the killing. A second man, Devin Brown, was also indicted on related charges. Yella Beezy has pleaded not guilty. He has been on bond since his arrest, and his trial is now set to begin on August 24, 2025. If convicted of capital murder for remuneration, under Texas law, he faces either life in prison without the possibility of parole or the death penalty. Those are the stakes. That is what is sitting on the table right now. And then, on July 27, 2025, the state's witness list dropped. Assistant District Attorney Thomas Adams Jr. filed a list naming 194 people expected to testify. 194 names. Among them was Mo 3's mother, Nicole Noble. Among them was Yella Beezy's own girlfriend. Among them was Benjamin Rainwater, Mo 3's manager, who had already appeared in court during a prior hearing in the case. And sitting on that list, under his legal name Devarius Moore, was Trapboy Freddy. The moment that list became public, the internet exploded. Now here is where the legal distinction matters enormously, even though it got almost completely buried under the noise of social media. Trapboy Freddy was not charged in this case. He was not accused of participating in the alleged murder for hire. He was not indicted alongside Yella Beezy or Kewan White. He was listed as a prosecution witness, meaning the state believes he has knowledge relevant to their case that can help establish context for the jury. And the reason prosecutors wanted him specifically goes beyond just his friendship with Yella Beezy. Court documents and pretrial hearings revealed that Trapboy Freddy also had his own well-documented personal friction with Mo 3. He was not simply a bystander to the rivalry. He was embedded in it from multiple angles, connected to Yella Beezy on one side and carrying his own history with Mo 3 on the other. That made him uniquely valuable to the prosecution. They needed someone who could speak to the timeline from the inside, someone who lived inside that world and understood the dynamics of those relationships the way only a person who was actually there could. He was subpoenaed. A subpoena is a legal court order compelling a person to appear and testify. You do not get a choice when you are subpoenaed. Refusing to comply can result in criminal contempt charges. That distinction matters, but in the court of public opinion, none of that nuance survived the first 12 hours. The moment his name appeared on that witness list, the snitching narrative was already in full motion. And to understand why it spread so fast, you have to understand what that word means in street culture and how deeply it is embedded in the value system that surrounds hip-hop, particularly in cities like Dallas. In that world, cooperating with law enforcement against someone who was once considered a close associate carries the most serious social penalty imaginable. It does not matter what the circumstances are. It does not matter whether you were forced. It does not matter whether the person you are testifying against is someone you have had conflict with. The label itself is permanent, and once it gets attached to your name, peeling it off is nearly impossible. Trapboy Freddy had publicly called Yella Beezy his brother. They had released a project literally titled "I'm My Brother's Keeper," and now his name was on the state's witness list in a capital murder case against that same man. In the eyes of a large portion of his fan base and the broader internet, the conclusion was already written. Blogs ran the story. YouTube creators made videos. TikTok pages went viral explaining who Trapboy Freddy was and what the witness list meant. Reaction channels broke it down in front of audiences numbering in the hundreds of thousands. The problem was that most of that commentary did not bother explaining the difference between voluntarily walking into a police station and offering information and being legally compelled to appear in court by a subpoena. In internet culture, both things get collapsed into the same category. Being on a prosecution witness list became synonymous in the public conversation with choosing to tell on your friend. And once that framing took root, it spread at a speed that no clarification could outrun. The pretrial court proceedings added even more complexity to the story. Before the trial began, there was a 3-day hearing in July 2025 to determine what evidence prosecutors could present to the jury. Music, social media content, Instagram live footage, and interviews all became subjects of debate in that courtroom. Judge Chika Anyam of Dallas Criminal District Court 7 reviewed 9 songs that had been flagged by the prosecution. The state and defense discussed music connected to the alleged violent rivalry between Mo3, Yella Beezy, and Trapboy Freddy. The court reviewed Instagram live footage of conversations between Beezy and Trapboy Freddy. The judge ultimately allowed 3 songs to be heard by jurors. Mo3's 219 was allowed. Yella Beezy's Keep It in the Streets was allowed. And the Trapboy Freddy and Yella Beezy collaboration, On Your Head, was allowed, but with a significant condition. The judge ruled that Trapboy Freddy's vocal portions had to be removed from On Your Head before it could be played for the jury. The prosecution also needed advance approval before raising a December 2018 shooting connected to Trapboy Freddy. And a December 2020 Instagram Live described as a call between Beezy and Trapboy Freddy also required the judge's permission before it could be introduced. That ruling alone generated another wave of online discussion. Commentators pointed out that Trapboy Freddy's voice was literally being cut out of his own record before it could be played in a murder trial. His own collaboration with Yella Beezy was being used as evidence in a case where he was also a prosecution witness. The entire situation felt to many observers like something out of a script. The closer people looked, the more deeply embedded in this case Trapboy Freddy appeared to be, and the more questions circulated about what exactly he knew and what he was prepared to say. Trapboy Freddy pushed back publicly against the snitching label, and he did not do it quietly. He took to social media and addressed it directly in interviews, making sure his position was on the record. His core argument was simple. There is a fundamental difference between sitting down with detectives behind closed doors, voluntarily providing information about someone, and using that information to negotiate a lighter sentence for yourself, versus being handed a subpoena by a court and legally forced to appear under penalty of law. He made clear that he did not walk into any police station on his own. He did not go looking for a deal. He did not offer up information about Yella Beezy to save himself from his own legal troubles. His position was that a judge ordered him to appear and that he had no realistic legal option to refuse without facing contempt charges that could land him back in federal custody. He argued that the internet was collapsing 2 completely different situations into one word, and that word was being used to permanently define him without any real understanding of how the legal process actually works. He stood on that position publicly and consistently, pushing back every time the narrative resurfaced. But here is the problem with his argument, at least as far as street credibility is concerned. In the world Trapboy Freddy built his career in, the distinction between a subpoena and voluntary cooperation does not carry the weight he needs it to carry. The street code does not have a carve-out for legal technicalities. It does not matter whether a judge ordered you or whether you walked in on your own. What matters is that your name is on a list that puts your former brother in the courtroom facing the death penalty. And no explanation, however legally accurate, has been enough to change that calculation for the people who have already made up their minds. But critics were not satisfied with that explanation. They did not have to look very hard. The conversation quickly turned to Trapboy Freddy's federal case. In August 2022, U.S. Marshals and Dallas police executed a federal warrant at his Oak Cliff home. When they entered, they found a Taurus TCP .380 caliber firearm in his possession. They also found something almost nobody expected, a tiger cub caged inside the house. The case made national headlines, partly because of the exotic animal, but mostly because of what it meant legally. Trapboy Freddy was a convicted felon, which made possession of any firearm a federal crime. The tiger cub itself was taken by Dallas Animal Services, though no animal-related charges were filed. In May 2023, Trapboy Freddy pleaded guilty to 1 count of possession of a firearm by a prohibited person. He faced up to 10 years in federal prison under the terms of the plea agreement, along with a fine of up to $250,000. At his November 2023 sentencing hearing, family members and fellow musicians showed up to support him. He was sentenced to 16 months in federal prison. 16 months on a federal firearms charge where he faced up to 10 years. To some people, that sentence seemed reasonable given the circumstances and the character letters submitted on his behalf. To critics, it immediately became fuel for a conspiracy theory. They argued that a 16-month sentence for a convicted felon with an extensive prior record, including organized criminal activity, unlawful carry, assault, drug possession, and multiple probation violations, was suspiciously light. They pointed to his placement on the Yella Beezy witness list and suggested that the sentence was the product of a cooperation agreement related to the Mo 3 investigation. Number Court has made any such finding. Number verified information supports their claim. Number cooperation agreement has been confirmed publicly. The connection between his sentence and the Yella Beezy case remains entirely speculative. But in a story where speculation had already been treated as fact from the beginning, the conspiracy gained traction regardless. This brings us to what people mean when they say Trapboy Freddy has been banned from Dallas. There is no legal ban. No government authority has ordered him out of the city. No court has prohibited him from returning home. The ban people are referring to as social in nature. It is the loss of community standing. It is fans distancing themselves. It is promoters not booking him. It is producers and fellow artists who once moved in his circle, stepping back from any public association with his name. It is the invisible walls that go up when the city's culture turns on one of its own. Dallas hip-hop has its own ecosystem with its own unwritten laws. And when someone becomes perceived as a cooperator, the community applies pressure in the form of silence, exclusion, and rejection. That is the ban being discussed. It is not a court order. It is something in some ways harder to fight against, because there is no appeal process and no verdict that can reverse it. The Dallas hip-hop community has been split by this story in ways that reveal genuine philosophical disagreement. On one side are people who believe Trapboy Freddy had no meaningful choice. They argue that when the state issues a subpoena, you comply or face consequences that could derail your entire life, and that holding someone permanently accountable for following a legal order is both unfair and unrealistic. On the other side are people who hold firmly to the belief that loyalty to your circle comes before any legal obligation, and that appearing on that witness list against someone who publicly called you his brother is a line that cannot be justified regardless of the legal mechanics. That debate is ongoing. Neither side is given any ground. To fully appreciate how deep this situation runs, you have to go back to the history between Mo 3, Yella Beezy, and the broader Dallas rap scene. Their feud was documented and long-running, playing out in music, on social media, in interviews, and in street-level talk for years before November 2020. It was the kind of rivalry that found its way into lyrics and Instagram posts and made people in the city choose sides. Trapboy Freddy existed in proximity to all of it, closely associated with Yella Beezy throughout the peak years of that feud, and carrying his own history with Mo 3 on top of that. He was not a random name pulled from nowhere. He was a central figure in the world the prosecution is trying to explain to a jury. And that is what made the coverage so overwhelming. Because Trapboy Freddy was already a recognizable name, every development in the case that touched him became content. The leaked witness list, the ruling on the songs, the voice redaction from On Your Head, the 16-month sentence, the Instagram lives, the pretrial hearings, every piece of information became a new opportunity to process feelings about loyalty, cooperation, and the price of being caught in someone else's legal storm. Audiences formed firm opinions weeks before the trial began, and the viral narratives that took hold were almost impossible to dislodge with factual clarifications that came too late to matter. When you lay out the full timeline, the weight of this story hits differently. A project called I'm My Brother's Keeper in May 2020. Mo 3 shot and killed on I-35 in November 2020. Years of investigation with no charges. Trapboy Freddy arrested on a federal firearms charge in August 2022. Sentenced to 16 months in 2023. Yella Beezy indicted for capital murder in March 2025. The witness list filed in July 2025 with Trapboy Freddy's legal name on it. The judge's ruling redacting his voice from On Your Head. And then Trapboy Freddy going public to defend himself against a label that had already spread across the internet. Every one of those steps unfolded in front of an audience that was paying close attention and drawing conclusions at every turn. What this controversy has done to Trapboy Freddy's public image cannot be understated. He was building genuine momentum in the Dallas rap scene. His music was growing, his fan base was expanding, he was viewed as one of the most authentic voices in Texas hip-hop. a man who had survived legal trouble and kept making music that represented where he came from. Now, the first thing many people associate with his name is not his discography or his grind. It is his placement on that witness list. It is the snitching narrative. It is the band from Dallas that may not be a legal document, but feels just as real to the people enforcing it. Whether he can rebuild from here may ultimately depend on how the trial plays out, how his testimony is ultimately characterized, and whether the broader public can be reached with a more complete version of what actually happened and why. Because that is the deeper truth at the center of all of this. This story was never just about one witness list or one rapper getting named in someone else's court case. It cuts to the most fundamental tension in hip-hop culture, the collision between legal obligation and street loyalty, between protecting yourself inside a system that was never built for you and honoring a code that demands something entirely different. Trapboy Freddy did not invent those tensions. He got caught between them in front of a global audience, and the way people interpreted his position tells you as much about the culture as it does about him. The accusations are not verdicts. The speculation is not evidence. Those distinctions may not change anyone's opinion, but they are the difference between understanding what actually happened and accepting a story that was written before the facts were ever in. At the end of the day, what one witness list has done to Trapboy Freddy's legacy in Dallas is something no court ruling can fully reverse. The trial is still in motion. The conversation in Dallas and across hip-hop broadly is not slowing down. The man who once stood beside Yella Beezy on a project called I'm My Brother's Keeper is now on the state's witness list in a capital murder case. Whether that makes him a snitch, a victim of circumstance, or something more complicated than either label allows, is a question Dallas is still in the middle of answering. What is already certain is that this has become one of the most discussed and most polarizing stories in the history of Dallas rap. And whatever the verdict ultimately is, the conversation it started is not going anywhere. Drop your thoughts in the comments and let us know where you stand on this one. Make sure you hit subscribe so you never miss when we break down stories like this.